Hello everybody, thank you for coming to the channel. Today we're going to be covering sacred geometry and symbolism. This is going to be a basic class about both of them, both of the topics, and I hope you enjoy it. Without any more delay, let me go into our PowerPoint. So, numerous books and research, they go into a lot of detail about the fascinating intricacies and far-reaching extent of geometric principles in the fabric of our universe. So I guess the question is why, what is more profound questions that we can ask about geometry and symbols, and why? What kind of purpose does geometry have, and why certain things are made a different shape or geometric way? So the truth is that even though we notice some patterns in nature, we are also there's more, far more than reality that meets the eye. What this is more, it exists in a way in which we cannot sometimes perceive it with our 5 physical senses of sight and sound, taste, smell, and touch, especially if we are limited in our minds, not to accept certain kinds of evidence based only on a physical stimuli and physical measurement. So one of the things I'm going to ask you for this class is be open-minded about what you're going to hear. What I'm expressing here has been researched through different textbooks and articles, magazines, and it has been published in different books, and I use second source or better or first resource published sources to do my research. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to comment in the channel. I hope that you will start doing a discussion in the channel. I will post a couple questions there, and but I want you to keep an open mind, and if you don't agree with something, this is not only my view. Like I said, I'm trying to stay impartial, although obviously sometimes I will add a little bit of my interpretation in there, but for what I have experienced. So that's my experience. So I want you to hear about your experience with geometry, or what things have you noticed. So like I said, there's a more intangible reality that lies within, or well, say without or farther out our sixth sense. It's sort of like a sixth sense. It relies on further on a perception. It's sometimes more of an insight, and it's intangible. And sometimes people will say that it is more in the realm of the spirit, that it complements the physical, but it is also measurable in the realm of matter. It's an inner sense of insight. It's ethereal, it's subtle, it's elusive, and sometimes we can experience this as a primal instinct. And you know, we will talk in other classes. I would like to do a class about you know, archetypes and the soul contract, so you can understand how everything fits together. Researchers and philosophers of the past knew it, and they have written about it with the same credence as the physical realm. And this is in a time when science, faith, philosophy, and mysticism and art well hand in hand. So you will see representations of symbolism and sacred geometry and all those. This was because it was, for example, recognized and believed that matter and spirit were inseparable. They were parts of a whole. And these philosophers knew that the rules and structures evident around us apply as much to our physical selves as to our spirit. they believe, and a lot of people believe today still, that everything originates from one source. And in this knowledge, there was a lot of different, what we call now pseudosciences, like astrology and alchemy, that are based in some of these eternal laws and principles, and those have a genuine existence. And some of them cannot be measured properly. Nonetheless, they represent the physical world in all kinds of symbols. And like I said, we're going to see a lot of examples tonight. And you can see symbols in art and mythology and songs and music, especially in geometry. So we know that there's hidden truth and the first thing what we're going to be talking about tonight, and see, let me see if I can put this down on the PowerPoint. It's not, oh, this is media instructor, but like I said, we want to keep an open mind and heart, and we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And Plato said this about keeping an open mind and heart. So what is sacred geometry? There is a lot of different representations and definitions out there, but pretty much we can say that it's a synchronicity of the universe, in which we can observe that there are mathematical constants or patterns, cycles in nature, and the outcome of this process is of course seen in the natural world. And for some people, like myself, this is a confirmation that all these proportions are woven into the very fabric of nature. And a lot of people here, when we're talking about sacred geometry, of course, there might be some connotations that are religious or spiritual in nature. So this video today is not going to go into discussing the validity or the no validity of it, or the different beliefs. I want you to interact in the chat, and I want you to give us your opinion of what you thought or what you think that is, how do you interpret your world around you when it comes down to sacred geometry. But I will be covering some of the beliefs and how different cultures have used sacred geometry and symbolism and the basics of symbolism. So we pretty much recognize, most of us, that because there are so many things that are woven into the fabric of nature, and that we see numerology, we see numbers, we see patterns in nature, that all of these are the product of a delicate balance between chaos and order. And so we kind of pose the question out there of, is it a chance, or is this a higher order creation? So we're going to explore this together today. So here you can see that the language of shapes, and human beings use words to describe things. Mark Twain saying, words are only painted fire, a look is the fire itself. And so the language of shapes is extremely important in nature. You can see here that we have, you probably recognize the first one is from the dollar bill, United States, right? The second one we'll be talking about is part of the Jewish Kabbalah. And the third one is the triangle. And we will see that there is there's a linking of letters and words and sounds with geometric models to describe characteristics of experience of reality. So this is not collaborating with me, but I'm gonna go down here. For some reason it's just not wanting to go down. So all things which have physical existence through the physical senses Some people believe that only shadows or reflections, and they are incomplete sensations of a larger, all-encompassing existence that we call the great life. And Louis Henry Sullivan, the American architect, said that in 1856. Now, simple geometric symbols such as squares, triangles, crosses, and spirals contain messages that have been consistent across religion and philosophy, mysticism, the arts and the sciences for eons. These messages are built into our genetic makeup, and we will see how even DNA, the spiral DNA, is represented in other things in nature. So we will see similarities between the microcosms and the microcosm. So the organic things, big like the universe, for example, spirals, galaxies, for example, and then we will be looking at little things like atoms and things that you can see under the microscope, and how there is a harmony and balance in between them. So these are sacred images of elusive aspects of reality, but they enable us to structure reality so we can understand its nature and comprehend it in symbolic form. Geometry is a universal language that allows us to unlock knowledge which is contained in our memory about the true nature of reality and our ability to perceive it. So we're gonna take a point here in which we can say that geometry is in true nature of reality. It is its own language, and it's all around us, and it is celebrated throughout nature. So it remains vibrant, unaffected by the changing values of current society, retaining its capacity to wake up each new generation. It doesn't matter that we believe or not, or that we put value into it or not. A sunflower will always have a certain pattern of growing with, a spiral with the sun. The spiral galaxies will always will follow a certain pattern of creation. So it doesn't really matter which our value is. They are unaffected by our thinking. So, however, this universal language of geometry of the mind, we can see foundations that are really diverse and intricate. And let me go to the next. And we can see we use these symbols, and we use geometry for everything in life, from architecture to design planes and chairs. And of course, chairs are designed based on anatomical functions. We can see that the dancer trying to balance and try to harmonize the geometry. All of this is employed in a range of human activities. In sailing, you can see the person in the boat trying to balance the boat so she can work with the wind, etc. So you can see a lot of the immediate and intuitive knowledge with a purely physical intellect. As a spiritual person, you might be religious or not at all, and we know that sometimes there are strict rules and rigid structures that support an authoritarian environment, and perpetuate beliefs that others control your spirituality and progress. We know that. But we want you to open your mind to understand that there might be people out there that had other spiritual paths of personal development, or they're just simply exploring. And we want you to inspire you to open up to new possibilities of researching, be using empirical questioning, and listening to your intuition. So I hope that you will find this video entertaining, and we're gonna be talking. You probably have heard about something called synchronicity, and Carl Jung, the psychologist, called synchronicity to explain when there are many experiences that are used to pass by you by routine and mundane and suddenly take a new meaning. And a lot of people talk about, for example, they see the number 1111, oh, that's angels, things like that. There are multiple occasions of synchronicity at all times. You never heard a word before, and then all of a sudden that word appears 20 times in a week. That is synchronicity. So they're here. We're here to help you in a way to learn that there's other things out there that you might not have. They might not have personal or rational explanations all the time. Henry Brooks Adams was an American journalist and historian, and he lived from 1838 to 1919, and he said, "Nothing in education is so astonishing as the amount of ignorance it accumulates in the form of inert facts." So what we're going to do is we're going to let our egos out of the equation, and I'm going to try to, I'm doing my opinion in the video, to go through sacred geometry. As you can see here, we have 3 pictures, and in the left we have a picture of an electron microscope, and through that you can see the geometry of the protein enzyme, and this picture was taken by NASA. And then, of course, you're probably familiar with the picture in the middle of the screen, and then the one on the right, in which we can see the planets. So like I said, we're going from the microcosm to the macrocosm, from the small to the big. And you can see that nature is very wise. It normally uses certain geometrical shapes for stability. We'll be talking about that when we talk about spirals and what they mean in symbolic. So St. Augustine, which was an Algerian Christian theologian, said that one must believe in order to understand, and understand in order to believe. More patterns in nature. As you can see, here are a few examples of a myriad forms created by nature. Nature is very versatile. But you can see that certain shapes are always there. Spirals, circles, not that many structure and radiate forms, like, for example, squares, but there's a lot of spirals and a lot of circles. I remember when I actually took I was doing my doctorate in marine science in USF, and I swear to you, we spent probably, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 classes talking about something that I had no idea that existed, but it is extremely important, supposedly, for life in planet Earth, and that's the diatom. And the diatom is shown over here. The diatom is microscopic form, part of plankton, and there's different kinds. I won't bore you, but there's different kinds of it. But it is said that this was a plate from 1904, the first picture on the left, and there's different kinds of diatoms, and supposedly is what feeds into the flora and fauna, the aquatic fauna. And here we have more of different patterns that men use. So you can really tell that men is normally more attracted to forms that are more rigid, more triangular and circled together. There's a combination of forms, in which in nature forms seem to be more fluid, right? Now, I'm not a person that that really deals with conspiracy theory, but I thought it would be really interesting to look at some of the things that that people had put out there. And I believe I got this actually from a website that was under federal website, and they had written a paper about it, about what is does the dollars mean, what are the different geometric shapes that are represented. And as you can see, the dollar obviously has two sides. I don't have the other side here, but there's a lot of symbolism, and symbolism keeps getting repeated. And when there's extremely repetition of symbolism, we start to generation by generation, we start to accept the symbols and to understand without knowing what they mean. And I remember someone in my family told me one time, we were at a baptism in Spain, and somebody said to me, have you noticed how we were doing mass, we were sitting down in mass, and they told me, they were like, oh, have you noticed how everybody's repeating the words, but they don't understand what the words mean? And so that is, you might be somebody that's very religious, and maybe you understand a lot of the, liturgy or like dogma, whatever. That's a different thing. But I can tell you that I believe that at least 90% of the people that go to different churches, it doesn't have to be a Catholic church, it doesn't have to be, it could be in any other religion or faith, they're probably repeating things and passages and rites that they don't understand. They don't fully understand what they're saying when they're saying it. So symbolism is in our consciousness. It is, I'm hoping to make another video about hypnotism and hypnosis, and the human mind understands symbols. So by looking at the dollar, you can see that we have on the right hand side, we have the eagle, of course, and you can see they use it as the number 9. The number 9 is a sacred number, and they have 9 tail feathers, 9 spheres rising through the heavenly state. And the number 13 is also very indicative of some sacred geometry. Talking about the different powers of the colonies. 13 colonies, 13 stars, 13 colonies. You can see that they use Latin words, and you will talk about the Kabbalah later and where things come from. But for now, just to say that normally symbols are also incorporated by languages like Sanskrit, Aramaic, Sumerian, Latin, things like that. So they have the number. You can see that they say the day the Illuminati form is underneath the triangle. And this is one of the things, the triangle, in the 1500s, and if we study astronomy and physics, they're going to tell you the circle is the most important of the geometrical figures, but in truth, the triangle, it is much more stable, and the triangle is the one that is going to come out a lot in symbolism. And there's different reasons for that. It represents the Trinity. It represents the 3 powers. It represents 3 of the elements. We will see how the triangle is used by different religions to explain pretty much the same thing, but in a different way. And so a lot of people, because money tends to be the root of evil, tend to associate the top of the pyramid of the seeing eye with, some people call it the great architect, Lucifer, whoever, the powers that be, and the year or Anaut Coetis, which is announcing conception. But a lot of this symbolism comes from Sumerian times and Egypt. Now, underneath the pyramid, you can see that there are 72 bricks. And when we go through the Kabbalah, I'm not going to go through what the whole tree of life or the Kabbalah, the Sephirot, whatever name you want to call it. We'll give it it's called the divine triangle, the double triangle. There's other names for it. But I want to do a class on that alone. Because it's extremely interesting, but it is difficult to explain in just one class. But just to let you know that it is present in the dollar bill. So language, symbolism has a language. Symbols are extremely powerful. Whatever you write down, it will be ingrained in your memory. In hypnotism and hypnosis, which, by the way, doesn't have to do with anything with trance. There's nothing religious about hypnosis. We use hypnosis or hypnotherapy for therapy purposes. But it is true that you can, with repetition and writing things down, symbols, and one of them being the written word, right? Written language, then symbols are extremely powerful, and they can go into our unconscious and subconscious. So each one of those symbols is a picture of our mind. And just think about it like, if you think about, for example, prehistoric times, and you think about a prehistoric person that had no language yet. They have no language yet to communicate with each other, but they did somehow with gestures, right? So that's probably how they started forming different kinds of symbols. And the symbols are a matter of survival. So those symbols get into the subconscious very easily. And I know the symbols relate to deeper truths because I have seen it appear over and over again in different, I have a bachelor's in mathematics. I have seen that when I was in massage therapy. I've seen this come back again when I was with hypnotherapy. They are what is called occult sciences, which, we'll talk about the word occult another day, but sometimes words are given connotations. I wish there was a way for us to communicate without language, that we could just communicate mentally in images and symbols. Because once we add language to things, we put labels to things, then everything starts having a different meaning, because we're giving our own perspective of reality into that word. So a lot of people use the word occult. The word occult will start getting used in the 1960s and 70s by the mainstream, church or whoever was, at that time, to put pagan cultures and other things that were coming up that were not in the mainstream, let's say. So they use negatory aspects or negation aspects, negative aspects in the language itself. So I talk about hypnotherapy, and I was looking to the hypnotherapy, and if you go online to look at pictures for hypnotherapy, you will always find something like this, in which, there have been convinced people that we put people in a trance. Also, you will see that every time that you look at hypnosis, you will see some kind of spiral in black and white, like somebody's like making you fall into a spiral in which you are in a trance. So that's how we use symbols. We use symbols like that. We're going to be talking about Kabbalah, and today, just to let you know that there's a correlation between the tree of life and the Kabbalah. And here we have a couple of different representations. One that looks more, the one in the right, looks more like a representation of the tree of life, but by Egypt. Not so much what in reality is. The Kabbalah is considered by most Jewish individuals as occultism of the faith. Occultism of the faith. Only few people in the world have trained in Kabbalah extensively and understand all the ramifications of the Kabbalah. But pretty much in Western culture, we can say, and you have probably heard this in Buddhism too, in which there's different levels that the souls go through. Some people might call part of it might be a representation as the tree of life, but that's an oversimplification. But in here we can see that there are different levels, and as your soul goes advancing, through those levels, then you obtain, you go up the levels and you obtain enlightenment. We'll talk another day about the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is a really difficult and extensive thing to talk about. Now, in popular culture, we have runes. I normally use runes to see how my year is going to be. They used to be called the old bones. You throw the bones. Runes can made from different materials. I have several different pairs. Some of them are made of crystal or quartz, or it can be done with apple tree or cherry tree or any kind of wood that you want to mark symbols. But just you can see the symbols. You probably have seen them a lot in popular culture and TV and movies, in which angels have this inscribed on them, or some angelic, higher Nephilim culture, or you can also see them in Viking mythology. These ones are Norse symbols. And runes and tarot are two things that are, they come from different times in history. Runes are much, much older than tarot. Tarot kind of started in the 1800s in France, and it started as cards in Louis XIII court as a game, and it maintained its, popularity and change over time. Runes are ancient symbols. They come from, like I said, Norse times, and each one of the symbols has not only a story, but a representation and a possible future. Let me put it that way, a possible future. Now, we also use symbols in mathematics. Mathematics is, some people will say that it is a universal language. You don't need to speak, or speak the same language to understand that mathematics can work the same in English than in Spanish than in Chinese. Everybody knows, or if they can do a little mathematics, they can understand, oh, okay, that is an equation. That is a, we are taught mathematics for a reason. So mathematics, like I said, symbols are vital codes which enable others to share our experiences, to see what we see, and to feel how we feel. The language of symbolism helps us to represent the mysteries that we cannot explain. I think language is a very short, or a very, I can't come up with the word right now. I hope you understand, but it is not, right now I'm doing it, right? I can't come out with a word. I know what I want to say, but I can't come out with a word. So symbolism express much better the mysteries, express much better our inner and outer lives, our intentions, our meanings. Because with language, we tend to tint or discolor or add expressions or any other perceptions that are not really in the word. We made the meaning as we go. True symbols commune with our hearts and souls, and they have a life of their own. And the first symbol I can think of is a dove, a white dove. The white dove is symbolism for the spirit, or peace. So over time, we learn these symbols, and over time, over generation, the archetypal memory of a generation, it sticks the symbols. So that's why we keep remembering and understanding the symbols, sometimes without words. like we say, you have, look how many examples we have of geometry and reality. Over here, all these are examples of what we're going to talk about. I used to talk to this when I was teaching math to my students, which is the golden ratio. The golden ratio, also called the golden rule, sometimes it's actually, and they have an instrument in carpentry called the golden ratio, I believe it's called, and is used, golden ratio is used in everything because it is something that is present in nature. You can see that the egg, the shell, the way that some plants, tend to open at a certain proportion, the number of petals, everything kind of follows the golden ratio. But this is just in nature. But even in the artificial world of man, the golden ratio also reigns. For example, in the stock market. The stock market follows the golden ratio. What other examples? We can see the shell. This is probably the one that is more recognizable. I thought I had another one. There we go. In marketing, they, believe it or not, software programs use the golden ratio to fix models, little imperfections. But it has been known that a lot of the models or popular figures, Hollywood, most of the Hollywood actors, they'll follow the golden ratio. They did this with several actors, and they follow the golden ratio. So there's actually a way or a canon of beauty that the golden ratio follows. Now, Pythagoras, of course, had to come up into this conversation because Pythagoras thought that number and form are the basis of the universe. That was part of the Pythagorean doctrine. And he said, for the nature of number is to be informative, guiding, and instructive for anybody and everything that is subject to doubt and what is unknown. For nothing about things will be comprehensible to anybody, neither of these things in themselves, nor one relation to another, if number and its essence were non-existent. So think about it. How can we relate things to each other if we can, we from very little we learn to measure, we learn to count, we learn to relate one thing with another in relationship to a level, in relationship, even if you're using feelings, you're still relating things to a level of feeling, a level of perception, a level of number. Now, he also says deception and envy are inherent to be unbounded, unknowable, and unreasonable. But truth is inherent in the nature of number. Now, I think you probably have seen this a few years back. There was this Japanese researcher in which he took pictures, and this is some of the experiments that they did, in which there's two containers. They're hermetically sealed. This is after 27 days, and in one container they write a label. I believe both containers have water. In one of them they wrote "I hate you," and in the other one they wrote "I love you." And you can see the differences. And you probably have seen this before. I know they had a movie called The Secret. The movie called The Secret is actually relating part of what we're talking today. But it's talking about the law of attraction. Which is it's going more into a spiritual thing. But you can see that sound definitely affects liquids. We know that for sure. But words also affect liquids, and we are 75% water. So when you're using your words, you have to be real careful, because words have sounds. And sound are symbols. I don't know if you follow what I'm trying to say here, but they did different experiments, and I had put a poem of Maya Angelou, which is one of my favorite poetess, I think it is, poetess. And I actually got to meet her when I was a student in Fayetteville State University. I talked with her for maybe like a couple of minutes. It was something really quick, but I got to meet her. Very optimistic, very enlightened lady. And you can see by her poems that when you might not know who Maya Angelou is. Maybe you have been living under the rock, but maybe you have never heard about one of her poems. But when you listen to one of her poems, or when you listen to your favorite music or song, sometimes the words will move you, whether other times the frequency of the words might not do anything to you. That's because of archetypal and unconscious or subconscious symbols that you have acquired over time on how to interpret on your own perception when you're listening. Now, I thought it was really interesting that in sacred geometry we talk about the triangle, but we also are going to be talking about the circle. So sacred geometry utilizes the power of shape and number, that's for sure. And harmony and balance in geometric figures have been expressed and recognized as something that's non-physical but holy for many thousands of years. And we have seen this when we're talking about the cross, for example, the Christmas tree. You saw the triangle on the dollar bill, things that somehow are, either sacred or holy or patriarchal, or so. Which one is more sacred? The circle, the triangle? Which one is considered the most sacred? Well, it tends to be the circle, and I think this has to do also, we're talking about the time, probably the 1300, 1400. I know that Copernicus in 1550, Copernicus was trying to go against the church in a way, trying to use circles, which later turn out to be ellipses, to talk about the solar system. But the truth is that we have been using circles for survival for a long time. We use circles for things in which we depend on our survival, which is transport solids and liquids. Think about round buckets, mugs, urns, pipes, vessels. All of those utilize the benefits of a minimal amount of material and construction for the most space to transport solids and liquids. And solids and liquids, normally, it is one of the first things that we need for survival. Now, does anybody know what this symbol represents? Well, you probably have seen it alone, but it's Om, right? You heard the sound Om. So Hindus believe that Om, also written AUM, is the most ancient sound symbol from the original source. And Om acts as a non-specific name for the ultimate power behind life. Om is also believed to be the sound of the creation, the word of God. Om was written in Sanskrit at a time when letters were viewed as symbols of the divine. And what is interesting to me is that there are so many sciences, so much knowledge, we call them now hermetic sciences, that it has been hidden for such a long time. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this on the channel. I like to know the why of things. I like to find out, why are we here? What things, why does what do they say the Alpha and the Omega? What is all that about? Why are symbols so important for our subconscious? All those things are important to know, I think, because, but what is interesting to me is that it has been so much suppressed knowledge. Not only they have suppressed knowledge, the powers that be, but also what they have done is they have made this bad propaganda about anything that is not. Like right now we use analytical chemistry and organic chemistry, which is alchemy, but somehow alchemy tends to be the devil's work. we talk about, chakras and energy, polarity, and all that stuff, which is like now in the New Age thing is coming brand new right now. But until like 30 or 40 years ago, it was considered almost like, well, if you were not a pagan, remember that, if you have taken my course or you have seen some of the slides on my weekend course, you see that only 2% of the population of the United States is, everything that was the pagan world existed before the Christian world, and then, and of course the tribal world, not so much Wicca. Wicca came on to the 1940s. So there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation out there too, but Vishnu, the Hindu god of sustaining lives, had this in the Yushpanyadyats. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. I'm so sorry if I didn't, and it said, "On the beginning, the middle, the end of all creation, of letter I am the A." This was in the Yushpanyadyats, and it has been found in some Sumerian texts. And if you are interested in some of the theories, I will recommend that you read Zachariah Sitchin. Although some people have been trying to discredit him for a long time, but he was a very serious researcher and talks about different planets, the planet Nibiru, and other civilizations that came before the Christian civilization. This is the seed of the sound Om, and this is the seed sound of Om. So this is the symbol in itself. Now, the Alpha and the Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet, and I think everybody knows that. But they appear in the Bible in the book of Revelation on 21:6, where God says, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." The letter A in English, in the English alphabet, in symbology means complete, perfect, pure, and unrestricted. And I'm not going to try to hypothesize too much because I don't want to get into a religious debate. This is only my own thinking for what I have researched. There is a reason why the first man in the Bible is called Adam. There is a reason why, the Kabbalah and certain texts in the Jewish culture are being only read by people, by the priests or the rabbis that have certain power. There's something there that tells me that and not so much a conspiracy, but definitely that we'll talk more in the Kabbalah because I don't wanna get too much religious in it. But just to let you know that all the letters in the Jewish alphabet had symbology and a number, and every person has a name that they were born with, which vibrates at a certain frequency, and each letter is going to give a certain sound and frequency. And so when we follow those numbers, you can actually know more about the type of person that you are in your possible future. Now, what's interesting is that this has existed since Sumerian times, and I found really interesting, now talking again about shape and symbology, how we read the rings of a tree, as you can see in the picture on the left, and the circular rings in a trunk tree tells you of the passing of the year. But also look at the clock. Why isn't the clock triangular? Okay, you can say, well, Susanna, how is it gonna be triangular when there's like 12 numbers? 1, 2, 3, goes from 12 to 1. But what if I told you that in Egyptian times, for example, they might have had things like that. They have the number 3, 6, and 9 in a triangle, and that was normal for them. What if I tell you that things have come from different systems, the hexadecimal system, which is also in our computer science and our programming. We do programs in cryptography and all kinds of, they have technology now called blockchain that use the same principles that the Egyptians use. So As you can see, there is a lot of different technologies at different times. So it seems like we're pretty much repeating. We're coming to a certain age in which we're repeating some of the technologies that we knew previously. Now, time is represented always as a radial circle. If you go to online and look for a picture of hypnosis, for example, then you will see that the circles are black and white, because not only they want you to think in a circle, you're falling into the circle, in a circle that you don't know where you're going. It's not all white, it's white and black. There's a falling into the circle. Everything is a symbolism. Now, the letter C in English is really interesting, because the letter C is equal to collaboration, communication, community. And look at these families. They're around a round table. They're linking hands in a circle to give thanks for the food. We have been doing this for hundreds of years, right? Because a round table makes communication easier, especially when socializing. King Arthur's round table of knights is a symbolic of equal status or status. And you can see there's a description there by Walter Map in 1470. So even letters have different symbology. Now, what better place to talk about symbology than Stonehenge? Stonehenge. Another day when we talk about astronomy, we'll talk about Stonehenge, but just to let you know that it is believed that it was some kind of calendar for the Druids, for those tribes. Most of the stones that are in Stonehenge now have been moved. Normally you go through the entrance of the Stonehenge, and the heel stone, which is the major stone of the whole group, is standing tall, and it's actually one, I believe there's only two rocks right now, the heel stone being one of them, that has not been moved since the first excavations began in 1800s. And the government of Great Britain had started to do excavations, and a lot of excavations were done in 1927 to be able to find out the true nature of Stonehenge. We still don't know how these tribes carry these huge stones for such a long periods of time and with such weight. But we'll talk about Stonehenge but just to let you know that what is important is that even through nature, either that being by the tribes that started the calendar, if this was a calendar, or inclusive by the people that started working Stonehenge from the 1800s and on. Everybody tried to make a circle out of it, maybe just for tourist attraction, but it is believed that there was some kind of sacrificial or calendar. Now, another one that is normally not as famous as the Stonehenge, even though that in Great Britain there's more than 300 and some different representations like a Stonehenge. They're just not as famous. But in the United States we have the big medicine wheel, and now we know that wheels are used as a metaphor for life and its cycles. So we can see that this is always like following a tribal representation. And you can see the differences, how they divide the inner part of the wheel, the medicine wheel. We don't know if they had to do with the moon cycles. There's like so many books about Stonehenge and the medicine wheel. You can look some information. But what I wanted to impart upon you is that we, every symbol, even symbols from today, we talk about, if you study marketing, you'll know about McDonald's, the M for mother. Also, M is one of the sacred letters in the Jewish alphabet. Apple in itself, the apple picture follows the golden ratio. There's so many things that we can talk about. One day maybe I'll do a marketing course and we'll talk about that. Now, there's always, in the universe, there's always some kind of duality as opposite forces. And people interpret the duality, I believe, wrongly. It is not to mean good or bad. It is a balance between both of them. So you can see here that normally duality tends to create hate, war, and terror, and envy, and all kinds of different things are not good. And but that's because us as humans, we have put that those feelings of good and bad into our language, into our way of being. But in itself, the symbol, the duality of, and a lot of people will think about the yin and yang as being equal, like feminine, negative. Like for example, we have here, I apologize for this. We have here male and female representing the two sides of a great radical dualism. But in fact, they are perpetually passing into one another. So fluid hardens to solid, solid rushes to fluid. There is no wholly masculine man, no purely feminine woman. And this was Margaret Fuller, an American journalist and transcendentalist. And she said this. She got a very short span life between 1810 and 1850. But this is true. We do learn these principles in massage therapy, and when you study the Eastern philosophies. And see, we give a lot of meaning to everything we say, because we have to label. There has to be some kind of type of controls to make us feel better, and to make us classify things. We always want to label things, classify things, label things. And so we have the visible and the invisible, of course. There has to be some, the right and the wrong, the high and low, hold and release, pleasure, pain, absence and presence. Everything has to have its opposite to be in balance. Now the doorway to meaning. We're gonna talk about, if you take my numerology class, I'm probably gonna be talking there about how everything came being. The number 1, the number 0 is not really recognized, although we know that Egyptians used to use the number pi a lot for their buildings and constructions and fractions. That's where we got some of the, but the number 0 didn't come into play until almost the 1960s. I believe it was Leibniz, which is a mathematician, calculus genius, I guess. He was the one that started to use more the number 0 for calculations. But Sumerians and Egyptians love fractions and love the number pi. However, we can see in the Bible and other texts like the Kabbalah, and Buddhism and Hindu culture, we have seen all of this, that this all comes from Sumerian text. So what civilizations are doing, obviously you understand, is they're passing their knowledge from one civilization to another. The oldest records that we have are from the Sumerian civilization. And so they're saying the Sumerian 1 is man and 2 is woman. Now see, a lot of people think, okay, man is 1, so it's better than woman because women is 2. This is the way we tend to think. But this does not exist in sacred symbolism and in sacred geometry. So we have the opposites, the point and the line. They're opposite of each other. None is better than the other. The singularity and the duality, all of them are doing their function. So all of these are but parents of all the numbers. And today I'm not going to go into this because it is almost getting to our time already, and it is a lot of math and numbers involved. I don't want to put you to sleep, but hopefully I haven't put you to sleep yet. But we pretty much get number 1, and from number 1 comes 2, and 1 and 2 create 3, and 3 and 1 claim 4, and so on. And that's the nature of number. And so humans, we try to give names to the unnamed. So we try to analyze things, and you can see here, this is, believe it or not, on my right hand side, if you look at that and you have seen space 3D and you have learned or read about Einstein, the space versus, you might think, okay, that's the space, the universe extends forever. This is the shape of the space, whatever. But the truth is that all these calculations have existed before Pythagoras. There's nothing really new. We're just relearning some of the stuff, and we have been hidden, or we haven't been afforded the opportunity to learn this the right way because of our own labeling or our ancestors' past labeling. So you can see how the number 1 is a square, and that creates 2 doubles, and it doubles and it creates 4, and it doubles, it creates 8, and that's how a space, linear space, gets created. So where do we use division of a space? You can tell that we even use symbolism and sacred geometry on our, compass. We have 16 directions. The 16 directions. I'm going to show you the 16, how the compass came about, and here's the compass. I never thought about it. Why? Because it comes from the geometric sacred geometry. So the sacred geometry is the eightfold division of the grid in space. The number 8 is considered to be and we talk about how the triangle is the Trinity. And another day when we explain Kabbalah, I'm going to go through it more because I don't want to, but I don't want to bore you with much. But I wanted to explain to you a little bit about, if I can put this down, it won't let me. I don't want to talk about the tetrahedron today, but I wanted to talk about heaven and earth and what the octagon means. And I'm trying to find, we're going to talk about the octagon and the number 9. And like I said, I don't want to go into it because then I'll have to talk about the void, and there is just a lot of math and a lot of geometry involved, in which it might get too complicated. So another day we're gonna go through some of these forms, because the triangle means fertility and represents the number 6. The square represents the number 8 and 4, and some of them signifies money or finality. So the different of course structures or things represent different things. So for example, we have the octagon, which is present in the I Ching, and it is an eightfold grid of a space. And we see this in a lot of representation. Let me see if I have a picture here for you. This is the I Ching. And you can see that the circle is contained by a square, and the square is contained by a circle, and so on. And what is interesting is that using electron microscopes, they have been able to go into seeing the most small of molecules and elements and whatnot. And once you pass that, they have been able to go into the vibration. And although they can't see the vibration per se, they have been able to use instrumentation, and they have come out with a very similar representation as the one on the bottom, the one that says radiant circles of cause and effect are interconnected. And some people call this the flower of life. Now we see here that the square is very symbolic of connotations of space. And that's why, and I think Tony Robbins had a very funny video, and he was talking about, we live in a box, we get out of the box, which is the bed, right? We go to a box, which is to work, which is a cubicle. We come back home and we sit on a box, which is the car. And so he got a very, very funny video about this, but he was not wrong. psychology uses the square as a connotation of our space. This is our territory, and you can see here there's an old man in India sitting on his carpet, which is a square, a rectangle, and he's sitting over there. And then you can see a small child in which he pretty much is saying, "This is my space," right? He's pretty much proclaiming, "This is my space," just by being on a square. Now, roads, buildings, homes, workspace, like we say, storage areas, as all square out are zones of human activity in space. And a lot of this comes from Roman times too. If you have visited Spain or of the old country of Europe, any Italian or Hispanic place, you will see this happens a lot, in which from Roman times they used to divide the city in squares. New York City is also divided in this manner in many cities, and because they're trying to confine spaces and people and places, right, and different neighborhoods and whatnot. And you can see all of these types of space. So space is normally represented by the square. Like I said, the I Ching, we'll do another day when we talk about tarot and runes. We'll talk about the I Ching too, but it is a very similar thing. It is much more evolved and much more difficult to read. And you can see they contain so many different symbols, and it's just pretty much used to use by emperors to be able to deduce their future in battle. 8, the number 8, we're going to talk a little bit about it because it is important, because normally cycles go from 1 to 9. 0 normally is not in the cycle. And number 9 is a sacred number, and it shows finality. It shows like whatever you were working on that cycle is coming through. But 8 is known as the number of justice and the number of infinity, right? If you turn around the number 8, that is the infinity symbol. And as you can see here, it returns to unity, because it says, as it can be half again and again until it returns to unity. It is the only number in the first 10 numbers to have this feature. So think about it. Can you return to unity with any other number than 8? Now the octagon, you can see that it has been used a lot for geometric spaces, for art. And we talk about the I Ching, how the I Ching describes and decides the fortunes of each person throughout the year of his or her life. And it's interesting because the I Ching is very similar to the divine triangle. If you have seen some of my videos in numerology, Pythagoras and a lot of, including Jesus itself, were studies of mysticism, students of mysticism. Oh my God, I couldn't say. Students of mysticism. And most of them used to go to Egypt to learn science and mathematics, and they learned a lot of the geometry and the models and about the symbols and the nature of numbers. But one number that is extremely important is the power of 3. And sometimes some of these symbols get misinterpreted by Christians, but the power of 3 has to do with the Holy Trinity. And if you're a Christian, you know about that. The Holy Trinity of Christianity, which represents God in 3 persons: the Father, Christ, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and which is commonly symbolized by the trefoil. In its older form, the Holy Trinity was represented purely by symbols without personification, such as a triangle within a circle to represent the 3 aspects of the divine in the one all-encompassing circle. Saints will be depicted having halos of varying geometric shapes, but only gods as triangular. If you look some of the early Visigoth in Spain, we have a lot of architecture and a lot of sculptures, and some of them, if you look at the God will have a triangle over here on this part, on the sculpture, or they will have it on top of his head. So the triangle is extremely important. It's extremely important. The three intertwined fishes are found in the Roman cathedrals. If somebody is curious where the fish comes from, there's a lot. It comes from some tribes that were I forget the name. I'll come back to it. But I think there was the Mithril tribes. I had to check it out. I don't want to tell you something that's wrong. That's not true. But it was pre-Christian. So also they were popular the three rings on triangles, as the Trinity represents the three folds. And what's funny is that some of these symbols are used in pagan folklore, like Wicca, like the Trinity represented by the circle and the threefold knot, or the Celtic knot from the Lisdis Gospels. They're used, and a lot of people think they're pagan, but they're symbols normally are it's just a symbol. It's just being used differently over time. So we tend to divide things in threes, and marketing is the number threes used. Starbucks, every time Starbucks comes up with different flavors of coffee, they normally come in threes. If you want a customer to buy something, you want to have three choices. You give them more than three choices, people get lost. But the three is used also for describing things in language, and we said that we name the unnamed, and we have a start, middle, and end, length, good, better, and best, poor, worse, and worse, bronze, silver, and word, blah blah blah, first, and you can see some of the examples. Now we talk about physical sciences. Of having also in nature how they have patterns inside of the nature. And we talk about the Trinity of the human being. I think I went a little bit ahead and talked about this earlier, but let me see if I can find a little more information for you on the Trinity, because I wanted to cover that for you. Here we go. So I'm trying to go a little bit fast. I'm sorry it took me so long to go through this, but there's so much that we can be talking about this. So this represents the Trinity of the human body, and mind, body, and spirit. And if you have seen the FDA approved list of foods, or the food pyramid they used to be called, it comes from here. Believe it or not, there's so many symbolism that we use for so many different applications. But to have a mind, body, and a spirit, these three parts of the human condition are further Trinity. The spiritual body, or ethereal and intangible soul, is a counterpart to the physical body, which we describe in general terms as measurable matter. And humans are essentially dual beings. We're talking about always that constant fight. And the third part, the mind, has the sentient awareness of existence and straddles the physical and spiritual aspects to unite and balance them. And in Latin they used to say same mind, same body, something like that. Only with the mind we can assume an identity in a space and time and experience our reality. From the mind's point of awareness of being, other physical and spiritual beings are perceived to exist. So pretty much each one of us has a different perception of our own reality, and we're living pretty much in our own space, in our mind space. This separation also appears to give these others their own perception of reality, their own time. So a psychiatrist called Carl Menninger, he lived between 1893 and 1900, explained with the number 1 and 2 the concept of I, that is, in a state of association with 2 and you existing. Introducing 3 and the concept of numbers, it introduces the many, the universe that resides between or beyond you and I. The triangle is important, and I'm not gonna go through it because as we build on the triangle, we start coming up with the number 9, which is a mystical number. And I show you the picture on the slide that says Kabbalah. I show you that picture there of the Sephirot, all the levels. The triangle is just the first base, or the first part of that Kabbalistic structure. And so I don't want to go too much on detail right now, but just for you to know that it is considered sacred, sacred geometry, and it is used for almost any number. Number 5, altars used to be built on triangular shape for a reason. It says the spirit that stabilizes and orders matter. And you can see here what I was trying to say. So the 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. So there's second level triangles, and as we double the triangle, we should say that the triangle on the top is our physical existence, with the mind being outside of that triangle. And when we double the triangle, then you can see the second triangle, triangular form, has the mystical 9 on the bottom, which means that's our perception of our reality. Some people had started thinking and talking right now in pop culture about that we're living in a holographic universe for a reason. And we'll talk about that in another class, which is a little more advanced. We will be talking about parallel worlds and duality and things like that. The power 6, I learned this, the power 6 in chemistry. As number 6 is extremely stable. Most molecules try to stay under this structure of the hexagon, and is used for strength and stability. You can see different bicycle wheel spokes are hexagons, umbrella struts, bees, footballs, things that had to retain a certain structure, parachutes, and this is done to optimize strength and storage space. Now we're going to talk about reality and planes of existence really fast. So when we're talking about planes of existence, I don't want to talk about the parallel. I'm not trying to mean parallel worlds or parallel dimensions or anything like that, but we're talking more about planes of existence once you have achieved those levels. And I hope that you will watch another day my Kabbalah introduction. I'm gonna try to do one, even though I'm not an expert on that. I don't claim to be an expert on that, but I'm just trying to put the information out there so you can decide. But planes of existence and reality, the number 9, which is a sacred number, is associated with infinity. And because the digits and multiples of 9 always total 9. And so number 9 is linked to cycles of cosmic time and the process of birth and growth, maturation and death, spiraling towards sources and pinnacle of enlightenment, and early mysticism. In chakras, the number 9 is also associated with the all-seeing eye, with the crown chakra, and the number of the perfect man who has mastered the lessons of life and overcome challenges along the way, as the soul passes 9 stages on its way to rebirth and its return to enlightenment. One day I would like to tie this and talk to you about soul contracts and past lives. I would like to do one interactive live about soul contracts and past lives, and how hypnosis and hypnotherapy can play a role in recovering some of those past memories. So I'm gonna leave you with this. I hope that you are moving forward from skepticism I would like to hear from you, some of your thoughts in the channel, some of the information that you find. If, you know, they said that, like Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. So move forward from skepticism, share your information in the channel. I hope that you enjoyed this. I know that it was a very long video, but I hope that you're enjoying this. And don't forget, in about an hour, I'm gonna be posting this on the channel, so subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, please stay on the channel. If you unsubscribe, then, you know, we're trying to